Yo, what's shaking? Welcome to another edition of the Orangebloods Modcast. I'm Geoff Ketchum. That's Anwar, Alex, Jason. We're talking Texas football as we do every Thursday live here on various platforms. You might be watching us on YouTube, Facebook Live, whatever the case may be. Welcome. We're going to be talking about Texas quarterbacks. Do us a solid. And taking your questions as well. I want to try to get as interactive as possible today. Seems like a good day to do it, considering how slow things feel as we finish out the month of February and the rules and recruiting that are in place. And we're still a month away from spring football. But yes, do us a solid. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done that. We're 11,000 plus and growing. Like the video. Do all of the things, comment in the comments section. Definitely jump in the chat today. Fellas, before we start taking questions from the audience as they start to pile in, I wanted to start off by acknowledging Anwar first and foremost. There's a calendar, there's a spring schedule that's officially out now. So we have an idea from beginning to end of what the Texas spring training camp will look like. And I wanted to start off with some conversation specifically about the quarterback battle. It occurred to me that while we've talked a lot about Quinn Ewers and Hudson Card and that position going into the first game, I don't know that any of us have ever outlined our expectations of what the quarterback battle will look like from beginning to end. With the schedule being announced this week, it was my first real reality check of, okay, there will be 3 practices a week. And I just started to prepare myself mentally for what it might sound like during those weeks. In your head, and we'll just go around the room, but I wanted to start with Anwar. You think the framing of the quarterback battle from the first practice in late March all the way through the spring game and then into the summer and into August, how do you think it unfolds in terms of how it's presented by Sarkisian, who's getting first-team reps, all of that kind of stuff?
First of all, good morning, Drew. I think it will look exactly how it looked last year, just reverse the names. I think it's going to be, instead of Hudson Card, last year was Casey Thompson. I think it's going to look exactly the same, where you're going to have one guy who's the number one guy in the spring, another guy who's the same guy will be the number one guy in the fall. It's the summer. Let me get my seasons correct. And then by the time training camp rolls around, then that's when more than likely we hear of the overtaking. So I expect Hudson Card to be the number one guy throughout the spring. I expect him to be the number one guy throughout the summer. And then in the deja vu moment, I expect that Quinn Ewers by, the first scrimmage or so somehow moves into that, and then the second at the latest, and then Quinn ends up being the opening day starter.
Jason, does that sound about right? Or what same question essentially though. What are your expectations for how this thing that we're going to talk more about than anything else, how it actually unfolds in front of our eyes over the course of the next 6 months or so?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. First off, what up, Chris Schultz? He in the comments he said hi to me at Red Horn Catch. Remember last Friday, you asked me if I was going to meet somebody for lunch, and
yes,
I was having lunch, and Chris walked by and introduced himself and said I was his favorite mod, and I was the best one on the Modcast and the best looking. And I won the draft. Not really, but he did come say hello, and good to meet a Orangebloods guy. But there's Chris. My expectation, honestly, I think it's going to be about 50-50 from the jump in terms of snaps. And I think we'll all be tracking it. We'll all be talking to sources and checking in at scrimmages and seeing who took what reps and whatnot. I think it's going to be about 50-50 until we get into fall camp in August. Kind of like Almar said, I think then you're going to start seeing some separation. And if I'm trying to get very specific, I'm guessing a couple weeks into fall camp, Quinn Ewers probably emerges as the starter, which I think everybody knows it's going to head that direction at some point. But I think spring's going to be about keeping things pretty even, keeping things 50-50 would be my guess. And then I think a couple weeks into fall camp, kind of like Almar said, that's kind of how it unfolded last year, right? I think Ewers takes control in fall camp. Yeah.
50-50. Wow.
Alex,
Yeah,
anyway.
I think Anwar, they gotta, I get it, like get Hudson Card more action, whatever. I think you got to bring Quinn Ewers up to speed quickly. I don't think you can have him running second string all spring. I think you've got to utilize as much of that as you can. So,
yeah. I mean, for me, I don't know if Ketch, you were coming to me with the same question, but
sure.
That was a take from Anwar what's one of those that just like I feel like that's so hot. The Hudson Card through all of spring as the number one, and then coming into like that burned off my eyebrows, brother. Like I can't believe, to me, I'm on the I'd be like my expectation. It's crazy. My expectation has been kind of just the other way. Like the others, I figured we go up there to the first practice and we see probably Quinn Ewers out there first with the first group.
So we have three different opinions.
That could be wrong. It could be well. I mean, I'm certainly more aligned with Jason's opinion. I don't think that it would just be Ewers the whole time. I mean, we've seen with these guys, we've seen how it was handled at certain points with Card and with Casey and stuff like that, where they would intermingle in with the ones, right? It'd be one guy with the ones for team drills one day, another guy with the ones for team drills another day. That's just how it was. I would expect maybe something like that, but I would kind of expect the big, there's always that one sort of significant moment at the very beginning of practices where you just, at some point, one guy's got to be the first guy to run out there with the ones. And if I were to bet, I would say it was going to be Quinn Ewers. That would just be my opinion. We've seen Hudson Card. This staff has seen Hudson Card. If barring any just major accomplishments that he's made or, steps forward that he's taken through this process, I would think that, they're probably coming into this thinking Quinn's going to be the guy. And if so, let's get him out there. Let's get him going. So that would just be my prediction. Clearly that doesn't come from with any, no coaches have told me that's going to be the case. I don't know if I know that always Anwar, what you say it always comes with good sourcing and stuff. But if I'm talking about it from a perspective of just what I had envisioned, that is certainly what I had envisioned.
Well, the thing is, Alex, and by the way, this is just opinion. And actually, I have one quick question. Do you guys hear anything in the background? Ketch, you hear anything in the background?
I don't hear anything.
Okay, perfect. My son's here. He's got a Disney movie playing. I want to make sure there's no copyright infringements on the video. So I've got Encanto like singing in the background. I just want to make sure you guys.
Anwar knows if we could hear it. Like an hour after the video has been posted, we get flagged for having copyright infringement. So it's a completely fair question to ask.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just didn't want to mess up anything.
Yeah, not with Disney especially. Yeah.
Yeah, they shut down like our whole YouTube channel probably. But Alex, the risk of that, right, is you want to give the appearance to Hudson Card that he still has a chance to like win the job. I think if you go, Alex, the risk is if you go 10 toes down and you go Quinn Ewers, then you're basically telling Hudson, go ahead and transfer after the spring and we'll just deal with Hudson and Maalik. Like, I think you still got to dangle a carrot in front of this young man, even though, it may or may not happen. You still got to me, you got to make him believe that there's an opportunity for that to happen. I don't know. To Alex, last year when he talked about some of the toughest quarterback decisions he ever made, and I think the catch was it like Matt Leinart, Matt Castle, I believe he was trying to decide. He's still with that one was still giving each person an opportunity to win the job. So that's why Alex, if it happened, I wouldn't say, my God, what is this guy doing? But if that did happen to your scenario, then I think he's showing Hudson the door right away.
Elmore, real quick, that's why I think it'll be 50-50. I didn't verbalize it, but that was part of my thought process is you can't bury Hudson Card. But circling back to something Alex said, even if Hudson, listen, I don't want to poo-poo all over Hudson. I really like Hudson, always have. But even if he goes out and performs really well in the spring or even in fall camp, how much confidence can you have that that's going to carry over into the games? Isn't that kind of what we saw last year? So, I think you do 50-50 is the safest way to play it for the spring and then kind of have that separation in fall camp.
The elephant in the room all throughout. Now I hear a bit of an echo, FYI. Seems like I'm echoing for somebody. There we go. That's better, Jason. I think that whatever you did, that made it better. The threat of Casey Thompson transferring hovered over the program as Sarkisian had to be careful with what he did, because there was always this thought that Thompson might be out the door, and then what would you do? And hey, to be fair, what would Texas have done last year if Hudson Card had? Boy, it's a completely. I haven't even stopped to think about like what I'm asking here, but if Casey Thompson had transferred in the spring because they thought Hudson Card was going to win the job, I don't even know how that looks, knowing that the Arkansas game may happen exactly the way that it would have happened, but there would have been nobody else. It would have needed to be Hudson Card the rest of the year. And who knows, maybe he works his way out of it. Maybe it's a big stinking disaster, but that hovered over the decision-making all the way up through August, when even when he announced Hudson Card as a starter, Steve Sarkisian went out of his way to paint a picture publicly as pretty as possible for Casey Thompson to try to keep him. Is he going to do that for Hudson? And if they know that Hudson Card isn't leaving until he gets his degree, it feels like the $1 million question would be, when's he going to get his degree? Because if you think he's going to stay for one more season because he's going to finish off things academically, then you're probably in a position where you can do whatever you want to. I wonder if there's really a Hudson Card threat of a transfer in the immediate foreseeable future, because I think that he's placed a real emphasis on getting his degree. He's in the McCombs Business School. I think he's committed to finishing that out, or I think he and his family would view this Texas experience as just a waste of their time. So he's going to get his degree. Whenever that happens, could shape the way I think Sarkisian treats this. I just know this, Anwar. If he cared about Hudson Card's feelings, see, Jason, the thing that you brought up that's what I was thinking. It's what led me into this discussion, because mentally I was thinking to myself exactly the way you were thinking. But then I started thinking back towards November, Anwar. He at no point went out of his way to lift Hudson Card up, pump him up a little bit, talk about his upside going into the next year. I mean, there's been plenty of times for Humpty Dumpty to get put back together again in this metaphor. Obviously, Hudson Card is Humpty Dumpty. And I just don't have the sense that that's been a Sarkisian priority. It would be interesting to see it become a priority now, when if the idea is you want to massage those feelings, you could have done some of that more during last season, and it just never really happened. And it does make me think that it's not quite the same thing as last year.
Well, one of the big differences, obviously, to your point, like Ketch, you can't deny that Quinn is Sarkisian's guy. Like, that's his guy. Like, that's the guy he recruited. Like, that's the guy he brought in. Like, that's the guy that he co-signs on. He didn't recruit Hudson Card, the same way he didn't recruit, Casey Thompson. So, he recruited Quinn Ewers. He recruited Maalik Murphy. Like, those are the guys that you would expect him to at some point say, okay, especially going into year two, when you've already given up your mulligan year, which was in year one. So, again, it's the question becomes, if this team finishes 7-5, 8-4, let's say that's the floor for whatever this team is. Let's say 8-4 as a good number, right? What's the feeling as a Longhorn fan if you're 8-4 with Hudson Card as the quarterback, as opposed to 8-4 with Quinn Ewers as the quarterback? I'm thinking that the feeling is probably going to be a lot more different, probably a lot more optimism if Quinn's the guy, more so than anything else. So, yeah, I don't know if he's going to go out of his way in order to, make sure Hudson feels great about anything like that. We saw, like you said, at the end of the season, he was open and honest about everything, and again, you Ketch, I've talked about this, and this kind of bleeds in a little bit to what you were talking about earlier, Jason. The one thing that Sarkisian understands and that happened to him last year was that he got burned. He made a decision. He thought that was his guy. He thought that was the number one quarterback. And he ended up being wrong. But the way the Casey started performing, he ended up being dead wrong. I mean, it looked like at some point, Catch, you were like, what was he evaluating? Because when Casey started, it was like every series, it was either a touchdown or field goal. Like he had this incredible streak for a while where you kept saying to something, what was he thinking? I don't think Sark will put himself in that situation again. But the thing that we'll have to monitor is he just going to go all chips in right now, like Alex would suggest, and say, screw it, like I'm just going to get my guy ready? Or is he going to play the typical coach game of trying to, the balance, kind of keep guys around, all that other little type of stuff? Maybe the help from Maalik Murphy plays a little bit of a part in that. But, how he manages it will definitely be interesting to watch.
I think that Jason, I think it starts out 50-50. And the question I have, would there be a moment? I tend to think the answer is no, that he's going to say, we're not going to announce a starting quarterback until, sometime in August. I think that's what he'll say. But I wonder if there is, just like there was last year, when after the first scrimmage, Hudson goes in and takes all of the ones. And at that point, early on, Casey wasn't even getting reps with the twos. Like, they really made a point of saying for a couple of days, although nothing was said publicly, Hudson's the guy now. And they rode that all the way until he was announced as the starter. I wonder if there's a moment, and could a moment happen in the spring where it's no longer 50-50 and it is a majority percentage? Let's say it's 65-35, but enough that it's noticeable and that, sends a statement of where this thing is headed. Do you think there's any chance we see that in the spring? That's where I have a little bit of doubt. I think they'll try to position it to be as 50-50 as possible until they get to August.
Yeah, I think these coaches are pretty calculating. If you remember last year, I'm trying to remember, there was a practice when Hudson, might have even been a scrimmage, I think got all the first team reps and everybody's like, oh my gosh. And then the next day when it was open to the media, they made sure that Casey got the first team reps just to keep everybody guessing. I think we'll see more of that, but could you see a slight shift toward Ewers? That wouldn't totally shock me, just because, like I said to Anwar, I think they got to throw him to the wolves as much as they can to get him up to speed as quickly as possible. Think about Ewers. I think that's interesting, Catch and Key, that you mentioned. He's in the McCombs Business School. I don't know if he has another semester or a year or whatever to get his business degree, but knowing what I know about Hudson and his family, and it's been a while since I've talked to them, but when he was a recruit, that was a big, big deal to him. So if he's got another year or so in the McCombs School of Business, I don't think he's leaving. I don't care if he's buried on the depth chart or not. So, that could factor into things a little bit. But to answer your question, could you see a slight shift, as you said, 65-35? I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, but I think they're going to try to give the impression, especially even publicly, but to the players as well, that it's 50-50 and both guys have a fighting chance to win that starting job coming out of spring football. Now you get to fall camp, all bets are off. You got to kind of force your hand there, and you can't worry about it too much then. But I think coming out of spring football, I'd be shocked if Sark said, okay, Quinn Ewers is our number one guy, Hudson's our number two guy, or vice versa, of course. I think there's going to be some mystery. There's going to be, hey, both guys have a chance. Both guys played well. Both guys have room for improvement. I think we're going to hear that typical dialogue coming out of the spring football game in April.
Poor Jordan Whittington. He's going to have to dodge these. Which quarterback do you like catching passes from you on Orangebloods videos during the spring? Won't stop. All right, well, let's move on to some questions. If you are in the chat, we will back off from quarterback a little bit and try to engage in the topics you want us to ask, to answer about. I'll start with this one since Trent and Tiffany Thomas asked it twice. It got starred twice. Does the entering of Ryan Bushevsky into the transfer portal open up another roster spot for a transfer? Real quickly, no, it does not. At this point, he's a little bit of a different situation as he walked as a senior last year. He wasn't even on the scholarship board that we've been keeping over the course, as guys come in and out and commitments and transfers and all of that, as we update that kind of on a daily basis when events warrant. We didn't have to adjust anything with the news that Buszewski went into the transfer portal. That's just him fishing around for potentially another spot, but that impacted the Texas roster and scholarship limit exactly 0, just as an FYI. Alex, this one's for you. We'll all talk about it, but I saw it and immediately thought of you, and this one comes from Preston Hutz. Have you given up on Christian Jones as a left tackle? If so, who do you pencil in on February 24th?
I mean, I'm close to giving up on Christian Jones. I mean, Christian Jones was not good last season. I mean, if you just look at just historical comparisons and you just look at, the overall body of work from the 2021 season, Christian Jones, out of the 62 offensive line tenures that I've graded at Texas of guys who played over 100 snaps per season, Christian Jones ranks, let's see, in snaps per disruption allowed, he ranks number 41 out of 62 at once every 23.4 snaps. He allowed disruption, so he allowed either a quarterback hit, a quarterback pressure, a quarterback sack, a tackle for a loss, a run stuff, or he committed a penalty. Let's look at the offensive tackles who have done worse than that at Texas. Tristan Nicholson is a sophomore at 22.6. Marcus Hutchins, who was abysmal as a senior at 22 snaps per disruption. Denzel Okafor, his sophomore year when he was playing tackle, 20.5. Christian Jones as a sophomore was worse than Christian Jones as a junior, so at least he got better from his sophomore to his junior year. Kennedy Estelle, if you can think back that far, as a sophomore at 17.2. Last year, Andre Carrick was the second, the third worst offensive tackle season that Texas has had out of those 61 at 15.5.
Is that right?
And then other than that, all you have is Tristan Nicholson. And if you remember, Cameron Hughes as a sophomore, over 437 snaps at 12.
Carrick was that bad?
He was the worst offensive lineman that Texas had last year by far, which was a really weird thing considering how good he and Jake Majors both looked in those two games to end the 2020 season, right? We looked at those guys and we said, wow, things are pointed up for the future. Majors was okay. He was serviceable this year, but Andre Carrick was just really bad as far as his snaps per disruption allowed. I mean, if you just look at what Carrick did during the end of the season last year, or just through the entire course of the season, just his snaps per disruption allowed, and also the penalties for him. I mean, Andre Carrick last year allowed 6 quarterback hits, 3 quarterback sacks, 4 pressures, 2 run stuffs, 1 TFL, and he committed 1 penalty. That was all on just 263 total snaps. And so when you think about the fact that Angelau last year played like 700 snaps, Kerstetter played like 750 snaps, Christian Jones played almost 700 snaps himself. Andre Carrick, that's a pretty small sample of just 263 to have the second most quarterback hits allowed on the team last year, the most sacks allowed on the team last year. It's just 263 snaps. It kind of says a lot about that.
Anwar, anybody else have anything to add on the Christian Jones conversation? I feel like Alex just covered that.
There's nothing to add. I'm like, oh,
exactly. Quite frankly, I would, if it was up to me, I'd go down this Carrick rabbit hole of how bad is his lack of development last year in terms of what happened to the offensive line. But I wanted to go. We only have a limited amount of time with Anwar today because of just life clock stuff. Anwar, circle back to the question that you and Ari talked about. I feel if Bijan wins the Heisman, this comes from Sean Harris, that means we are in at least the playoff. What do you all think? Interesting question.
So I'll throw it to Jason and you guys who may not seen the video. The topic was, which would be the biggest indicator of success? Which individual award would be the indicator of success for this Texas football team? Bijan winning the Heisman, or Xavier Worthy winning the Bolitnikov. If you had to say pick one this right
Easy.
now
Yeah.
and say to yourself, which one meant Texas had the most successful season? Outside, I mean, just don't use those as not coach of the year because clearly we don't understand that. Out of those two, which one would you take?
That's easy. Bijan, if you're going to win the Heisman, you're on a competitive, contending team. You're not very rarely does a guy win the Heisman if you go 7-5 or something like that. So if Bijan wins the Heisman, that tells me Texas is probably 10-2-ish, maybe at worst.
Whereas I think they'd give a shitty, an awesome receiver on a mediocre team.
Agree.
I think that guy could still win the award.
It's like how Deontay Foreman won the Doak Walker Award. It's like these individual position awards are different than the Heisman that says you're the best because it's like with the Heisman, a lot of these voters are like say like, well, it's kind of like with like the MVP in the NFL and stuff. You kind of got to make it to the play. Like you have to be the guy that took like put your team on the back to get them kind of to where they are. Right?
I think they have to at least be in the Big 12 championship game for Bijan to be in the Heisman discussion. Anybody disagree with that?
Now here's the I would totally agree. Now here's the only caveats to because I think everything you guys are saying is I agree with you. Just know in 2016, Lamar Jackson won it at Louisville. They were 9-4. Johnny Manziel won it obviously 1 year. They were not a playoff team at that point either. So there have been like a couple of exceptions.
It can happen.
It can.
Ricky Williams.
RG3 won it, obviously at Baylor. And
those are elite quarterbacks, though, that, different animal a little bit, quarterback and running back.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, from a running back perspective.
You might have to go back to Ricky or Ron Dane.
Derrick Henry won it from Bama a few years ago in 2015. But they were 14-1. So
as do those extra games where you get to put stats and build your numbers up. It helps a lot. I mean, Bijan playing in a 15-game schedule, 14-game schedule probably means you get to 2,000. Anybody here think that means they're at least in the playoff? I don't know that I go quite that far.
I don't think it. I think it. But if they're one of these teams where it's like, the playoffs should expand to 8 teams because how can a team like Texas get left out and stuff? I think it probably needs to be that kind of situation, right? Kind of where they're really knocking on the door. I think they probably need to be a conference champion.
Yeah, I don't think it's
I'll give you
playoff
some
above.
Bolitnikov winners just to throw it at you. So 2021, Jordan Addison, obviously from Pitt, right? 2020 was Devontae Smith from Bama, okay? 2019 was Jamar Chase from LSU. 2018 was Jerry Jeudy from Bama. So here comes your outlier becomes 2017 James Washington wins it from Oklahoma State with a 10-3 record. But 2016 is D.D. Westbrook. 2015 is Corey Coleman from Baylor. 2014, I'll give you just a couple of more. 2014 was Amari Cooper. And then the real to everyone's point would be the Brandon and Brandon Cooks, one of Alex's favorite players. He wins it from Oregon State, and they had a 7-6 record.
Well, when did Alabama become wide receiver U, right?
When they started getting 5-star receivers every 5 minutes.
Every year.
Most of those dudes, LSU's had some dudes that have come out of nowhere. It feels like Alabama's guys are dudes. Here, I want to let's see how many questions. Probably one more question. I'll see if I can pick one that. Well, here's one. We'll all jump in on this. I don't know if there's a lot of new stuff to report on this, but Ben asks, take us through the O'Shawn Mathis recruitment. Does Texas lead there? And is there any talk of a commitment from him anytime soon? Anwar, you want to jump on that one real quick?
I could do this, and this will kind of be my parting shot. I got schools got delayed a little bit because of the weather, so I've got to get my youngest to his school at 10:30. So as relates to the O'Shawn Mathis thing, obviously you guys know he just released his top 5. So there's 2 things that are occurring at this moment. They're planning to make some spring visits. they want to make sure, he's going to a program that allows him to, rush the passer. So the things I've been told is that the Gary Patterson thing is good, but it won't be the thing that he bases his decision on. And then, he's going, the only hesitation where I'm not quite sure you're going to see it super soon is because they also still want to see what happens with other programs in the spring as well. So, this is a guy who's getting a chance to be re-recruited, but re-recruited at a high level by elite programs, as opposed to maybe what he may have faced coming out of high school. So, he has his 5. The plan is to visit those 5 during the spring and try to narrow down a decision, sometime, after that. So to make sure he can enroll. So he's finishing up his classes, but he definitely intends to get somewhere in the summer. So, so if you're looking for a timeline, with visits scheduled spring, I mean, you could definitely say sometime in April, but probably, I believe, before May 1st. So I guess technically, because I think it has to happen before May 1st. So technically, I guess we're heading into March. So yeah, by April, it would be my guess at this moment. Just based on everything I was told, I'd probably put like an April timetable in there.
It's interesting. How long did that recruitment of the linebacker from USC go that ultimately chose Ohio State? That one went into the summer.
Yeah, he went a while.
Quit paying attention to him. But see, I don't think you said Anwar, and maybe I'm not up to speed. You said the deadline is May 1st. Couldn't they technically enroll like in August? I mean, yeah, you'd miss all the summer workouts, but as long as you're enrolled for the fall semester, couldn't you just join a team as late as like August?
Yeah, it's a little bit. There's a NCAA deadline that yes. Now I'm sure you could still do it, but there's some sort of NCAA deadline that has to do with the May 1st. I was in the war room last week, and I don't have all the details up in front of me, so I don't want to get misquoted and have people put me on blast at this moment. So
and you're going to want to
on
be
your way out the door. Accidentally say something that has people screaming at you.
Yeah, I don't want to yell fire in a crowded theater. But I did have something in there. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
And while you're looking, I mean, common sense, most guys are going to transfer after the spring season, or I mean, they're going to want to be there for the first summer session so they can
if
go
at all
possible,
you would think.
Yeah, I mean, most
especially
guys
these transfers, man. Yeah, I mean, these guys are transferring to make some money. Like they need to get there. They need to get ready to go.
I mean, frankly, I'm surprised you didn't do it in January. Most guys want to do it in January so they can go through spring football.
Real quick,
but I think he has to graduate.
Jason, real quick, before Anwar gives us that little update, I thought the SEC rule of having to announce, I think by February 1st, if you were going to transfer inside the SEC is an interesting rule because it changes the dynamics in April or May should an SEC player from Alabama that has played under Sark and the staff enters the portal. It wouldn't be the bloodbath potentially that interesting that they put that rule in place. Anwar, go ahead.
Yeah, I got it. So it goes students, athletes transferring once within the division, kind of what you're talking about, Ketch, can play immediately as long as they notify the school by the deadline. The deadline for fall and winter sports is May 1st every year. So that's essentially, so if he wants to do a Texas, then he would have to have that, that by May 1st.
He doesn't notify the school by May 1st. Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
So yeah, we would have a decision, by then.
All right, Anwar, get on out of here. We will see you next week.
I'm glad that Disney didn't shut us down.
There you go.
Don't even say that D word. They may get us just
now all of the microphones. Now we're on. Come on, Anwar. You're a conspiracy theory guy. You know better than that. Hey, Alex, I want to come back to you on this one. Kind of staying with the conversation that we were just having. You literally just read a lot of the data points out when we took the question about Christian Jones. But do you see progression of Connor, Jones, and Carrick happening this year with another year under Flood? I just wanted to circle back. So I got so stunned by the Carrick info that you said at the end there. Jones made improvement from sophomore to junior.
Yeah.
Carrick didn't make the improvement from, I don't even know if technically he played. Did he play 4 games? as a freshman?
No, he didn't. I can look back and see how many snaps as a freshman.
That's all right. I just didn't want to call him a sophomore.
In 2020, he started the last 2 games.
Right.
I don't know if he over the course of, let me just look back and see. So 2020.
Well, don't even worry about it, Alex. You can look it up in a little bit. I just wanted you, because I'm asking you the question of your level of expectations for progression with those 3 players specifically with another year under Flood. I think I just brought up last year as they each have had a year and there was either a level of improvement or not in the case of Carrick. Your thoughts on all 3 of those guys? All
right. So Carrick played 40 regular season snaps last year, or the year before last. Didn't allow any disruption over that small sample, so that was clearly good. I think that was just in the 1 game. So he had that 1 game. He had the bowl game. I already said where I was on Christian Jones. So do you see progression out of? Look, I see progression out of everybody under Flood, right? I think that he's a good coach. Christian Jones, like Ketch just mentioned, he wasn't good last year. He wasn't good enough. He wasn't Texas good last year. He played like bad offensive tackles we've seen at Texas over the last decade. That's just how it was, Can he progress? I think probably, yeah, he can probably progress. We always talked about, Christian Jones, even though it's hard to remember now with how he was treated by opposing edge rushers last year. There was a point in time where we really liked Christian Jones's feet. Do you remember that catch as a prospect? I think he used to be a soccer player, stuff like that. People would talk about it. I think that he could maybe get there. The problem is we just haven't seen it out of Christian Jones. It hasn't been the real upward mobility, the real growth that we would expect, and this year probably needs to be the year. If it doesn't happen right off the bat in spring, we don't see a big improvement. I'm not sure it's going to happen with him. You might have to call it the same way you called it with Kent Perkins at a certain point. You said, maybe it's just not going to happen for this guy. With Carrick, I mean, he can't do anything but move up as far as I'm concerned. You talk about a project. He was a project coming in that we were very surprised to see be so effective as a freshman when he was called upon. He kind of looked in his second year, he had his big moment versus OU, and you really feel for him that's when he gets thrown into the fire, is the starting right tackle versus Oklahoma. That was when everything started to kind of go downhill for him. With Hayden Conner, I have zero doubt that he's going to continue to get better because he's probably the best student of the game on the whole Texas offensive line. I mean, Kyle Flood loves him because he's so coachable. You don't have to tell that dude anything twice. He takes his coaching to heart. You can watch him when you can sit there and watch a whole practice of just the offensive line, like I like to do whenever we're granted access to full practices, as we were a few times this year. And you can just see Hayden Conner just like he gets told the concept and he does it for the whole rest of the practice. Whereas guys like Tyler Johnson or some of these others, like he throws his clipboard in the air and says, "Why do I keep having to tell you?" That's never the issue with Hayden Conner. And Hayden Conner's big, he's strong. To be honest, dude, I've thought about the fact it's like, why couldn't Hayden Conner maybe play tackle if they needed? So, like, I kind of think he could. There were questions earlier about Christian Jones. I think you guys probably think he's going to start spring camp at left tackle, right? I mean, they're not going to put Carrick over there. There's not that many guys behind him who, at this point, before all the new guys come in,
the cavalry hasn't arrived yet.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're going to see more. So we'll find out kind of how he's looking and how he's doing over at that left tackle spot. But, dude, I do think that as these new guys come in, there's going to be ways and there's going to be permutations where things can get moved around. If Christian Jones is not up to snuff, if he's not playing better than he did last year, there's gonna have to be some changes made. And when you have guys at the level that are coming in, I know people worry about freshmen, but at some point, man, you got to turn the page, and you got to say it's not working with this guy. It's time to move forward with these new guys and kind of get this thing reinvented, because the offensive line cannot be the sieve that it was last year.
I got a few thoughts real quick. So first off, Carrick played in 3 games. catch in 2020. I'm looking.
Okay.
So he was a redshirt freshman last year. Secondly, Christian Jones just looks the part. Like if you see him, you're like, okay, that looks like a guy that Kyle Flood coached at Alabama. He is just a massive human being. Coaches by and large, my kind of oversimplifying thing, coaches are usually pretty conservative, man, when it comes to roster management. You don't see them, college coaches, you don't see them, and we've seen it at running back, and unless a guy's just awful, they're going to go with the guy with experience. Christian Jones is a big, massive human being, the kind of guy that Kyle Flood loves. I mean, Kyle Flood loves huge offensive linemen. We've seen coaches who like to take smaller linemen and beef them up and develop them. Kyle Flood loves huge guys. Christian Jones fits his profile. He's got a bunch of experience. I think he's going to have to be really bad or take a really bad step backwards for them to just yank him out of the lineup. I just don't think that's.
But Jason, he was really bad last year. I don't.
But
think
he was never even remotely threatened to lose his spot last year. Not even once was it.
Well, I mean, when you have guys like Max Merrill backing you up,
you could have thrown Carrick out there. I mean,
Kelvin
Banks wasn't getting here.
You have guys like Jalen Garth and like.
He's not even a factor.
Well, I know, but I'm saying it's like who else was there? It was
Carrick.
Carrick.
Alex, real quick. I think that's the story of the spring for this offensive line. It still doesn't have any depth, really. Until the new guys show up.
Oh yeah,
until we
found out that Hookfin looks like Hookfin's maybe going to be okay. But if Hookfin wasn't going to be okay, they wouldn't even have a 2 deep of scholarship players. Like you need Hookfin to have 10. Like that's crazy, right? Like so, yeah. I mean, like, yeah.
I don't see Kelvin. My point is, if I'm a betting man, even if Kelvin Banks looks like the best player, I don't think he starts game 1 next year.
I don't think it would be Kelvin Banks. I think it would be DJ Campbell, and I don't care if he's too short. Yeah.
I just wanted
not
to
out
say,
of the question, but I would bet Banks over Campbell at tackle. Yeah.
Are you kidding? You would bet Kelvin Banks starting the first game of the season over DJ Campbell?
I think Campbell's an interior guy. I think he can play tackle for you, but I think Campbell is an interior guy all the way.
Yeah. But you don't think that DJ Campbell, if given the opportunity to play left tackle in a competition with Kelvin Banks to back up and or take Christian Jones's role, you think that Kelvin Banks would beat DJ Campbell in that particular scenario that you view as unlikely because you view DJ Campbell as an interior guy?
That's a tough question because I love DJ Campbell, but I probably would still go Banks just based on.
I can't believe that you're saying that, dude. You've seen both these guys live. I know you've been at the same events I have.
Kelvin Banks is elite footwork, man. I mean, I would probably still take Banks in that situation. Now, who's going to start first? I'm probably going Campbell at guard, though. But
I'm flummoxed. I'm flabbergasted. Whatever F word you want to use, that's the way I'm feeling about that. Like I can't believe you would say that. Like
there's friends. Alex and Soup debates are the best thing about the mod.
Hey, last thing that I wanted to say on this particular topic. Just going back to how little depth there are, how many, because, the practices won't be open widespread. I bet if we collected like a jar and put $5 in it every time Kyle Flood reminded one of these players, if they don't get their ass going, the cavalry's coming. And, because the thing is, they can't there'll be an injury or two in the spring. And Alex, there legitimately will be walk-ons playing in the 2 deep. And, I don't know what that look even looks like for the defense. What does it look like if, Murphy or Coburn or Sweat or somebody like that is going against the 2s and they're going up against non-scholarship players? I mean, that's going to happen. So I think that will be different than every other position on the team. Flood's going to be telling those guys, if you don't get it going now, come the very first day in August, I'm going to have one of these freshmen taking your reps.
And he'll do it with very colorful language based on what we've seen from California.
And I mean, we talk about the left tackle. What about the right tackle? And what about Cam Williams when he comes in? And if he looks as good as he's looked on his senior tape, or as good, I've seen him in some of these some of these camps versus some of these really, really good edge rush guys, just with how big he is and how long he is. And I know people say that he's, you look at him and you see all this baby fat, and you see you see a guy who just looks like he's going to take time to develop, because he just looks like this big overgrown kind of dude who needs to lose a little weight and stuff. You don't realize, man, how that guy can, like, Cam Williams can come in, and I wrote this in my column, not this last week, but the week before. Cam Williams can come in and probably be a better right tackle than Texas has had in maybe 5 to 6 of the last 10 years. Texas has had some pretty miserable right tackle play. Like, I think the Cam Williams could come in and he could be better than Kennedy Estelle over there, right? He could be better than Cameron Hughes. He could be better than Tristan Nicholson. Some of these guys just right off the bat. So, there's going to be guys like that. And there's going to be others who come in who allow, weird things to happen along the inside. I talked about it earlier. Like, I look at Hayden Conner and I'm saying, well, why couldn't he play right tackle? Why couldn't he? And why couldn't Cole Hudson or somebody come in and be this awesome fire plug at guard that people are like, holy cow, how are we going to keep this guy off the field? Well, maybe we can't move Angle out. Could we move Hayden Conner to right tackle? Like, so there's going to be a million of those different permutations and things that could happen. So I totally agree with Ketch. With Flood saying, the Cavalry's coming in, it might not even be a guy who you're considering to come take your job. It could be a guy that comes to take somebody else's job, and that guy gets bumped into your spot.
Yeah, no, it'll be, I think the common theme will be, you guys are going to get every chance in the world in the spring to build a case that you are part of my plans. But if we get to the end of the spring and you haven't done that, do not be shocked when the cavalry arrives in the form of all those freshmen and we get them on the field to see what they can do.
A&M did it last year, and it worked pretty well for A&M, starting a couple of true freshmen. So he can point right down the road and said, hey, it's worked right there. We can do it here too. So
those were high level prospects too, just like Texas will be bringing in. This may be simple dad gaming, but it also might be simp ladad gaming. That's personally what I'm going with is simp. Simp asks, real question, will you guys be able to handle Kansas? No guarantees.
It's a road game. It's a road game.
That's a road game. Come on now. Like, let's not get too far. I don't know who you think you're talking to in this video, but I can assure you nobody's bowing up on behalf of Texas against anybody on the schedule. Let's see. Here's one. Let's see. There's actually so many questions that I'm now. Here's one from SC. We've always been good with a solid tight end. Will Sanders step up and be the guy this year? I feel like I'm putting that one on a tee for you, Alex. Do you have any Jatavian Sanders things you just want to get off your chest?
Well, I think that basically, if you look at the way that Jatavian Sanders was used last year, we've talked about it before, about how it looks like Gunnar Helm is probably shaping up to take over the Jared Wiley role from last year, the quarterback or the tight end who plays in more of the inline situations. That's how the offense liked to use. Coach Jeff Banks liked to use Gunnar Helm last year, was as an inline tight end who played in much of the same role as Jared Wiley. If we just look at the usage from 2021, Gunnar Helm inline for 62% of snaps, Jared Wiley inline for 65% of snaps. Now, Jatavian Sanders is kind of in the middle of where Cade Brewer and Juan Davis were, somewhere 10, 20% of snaps as inline tight ends, and most of their snaps either split out or at H-back. Jatavian Sanders actually played H-back 35, 40% of the time. He was inline about 50% of the time. So Jatavian Sanders was in a little bit of a role all his own, whereas Jaleel Billingsley, who's coming in from Alabama, when I charted his games, was in a role almost exactly like Cade Brewer's and almost exactly like the same way that Juan Davis was. So I don't really know what to make of how they view JT Sanders. I think they kind of view him as his own animal, as opposed to somebody who we can sort of look at the roles that were played by Cade Brewer and Jared Wiley last year. So that makes it a really interesting situation for me, because I can peg what they want Juan Davis to do. They want to split him out. They want to put him at H-back, right? I know with Gunnar Helm, 2/3 of the time, they want him in line the same way that they did with Jared Wiley. With Jatavian Sanders, I think they view him as his own animal, and he really should be viewed as his own animal because he's honestly one of the guys with the best recruiting pedigree on this whole team. He's clearly a guy that needs to be involved next year. If he's not involved next year, I mean, the guy's not going to be long for the program, period. Like, how many recruits do you bring in like Jatavion Sanders who don't get playing time in their first 2 years that end up sticking around, right? I don't think it's feasible, right? Ketch, I mean, You've covered this program long enough. I mean, think about Jatavion Sanders and think about the prospect that he was coming in. If that guy doesn't play his first 2 years, that's just it feels like it's probably curtains for the guy.
Well, Alex, I was literally going to set up Jason to this by simply saying if it's a deep room, they got numbers, and most of them are really young, except for Billingsley. The guys that aren't getting first and second team reps, whoever that is, somebody's going to be an odd man out and probably be on scout team for a lot of the spring. Whoever that is would be on transfer watch for me.
You got to watch a guy like Jared Liebrock. He's an out-of-state prospect.
Yeah.
He and his family, by the way, loved Texas and still do, I think. But anytime an out-of-state guy isn't getting a lot of playing time, he's on transfer watch. Yep. I think it's going to be Billingsley is going to be the guy. I don't think they bring in a senior tight end from Alabama who played a lot to not be the guy. I mean, Sanders is going to carve out his role. But if you're asking me come December, if we're saying which tight end had the biggest impact, I'm going with Jaleel Billingsley, even though people I talked to at Alabama said, he's got some things he needs to work on before he's, ready to be a consistent player. But I think Texas is bringing him in with the idea that he's going to be the main guy, in terms of snap count and receptions and things. I think Jaleel Billingsley will probably be the guy we'd be focused on.
Yeah, Jason, I'm with you. I'm really curious to watch, just observe from afar how the tight end positions reps work in the spring. Because every single guy they have, other than Juan Davis, who I think that guy is so talented.
Yeah, man, he's good. Yeah.
And if you told me that Juan Davis emerged as a starter, I wouldn't blink. I don't expect it to happen, but he's certainly as physically talented as almost anybody they have. So they got lots of good players, and somebody's not going to be happy with their usage coming out of the spring. And I think that'll be a position that everybody needs to watch. Jason Burke, we'll take a couple more questions and we'll get into.
Did I mispronounce Liebrock's name? Someone says I thought his name was Braden.
No, I think you called him Jared. You just got it mixed up with Jared.
Oh, my bad. Jared Wiley. Yeah. Oh, that wasn't even close. Yeah, Braden Liebrock.
Samsonite. Jason Burke asks, is there any news on Cutcliffe joining the staff? I've dug around a little bit on that this week, and I haven't heard that there's anything really that's imminent with Cutcliffe. The information that I got was that Cutcliffe has taken a bit of a step back. He's kind of reevaluating what he wants to do next. And then I also heard that, the Mannings, this came from a Manning related source, but that Cutcliffe, even is David Cutcliffe going to be on the staff as an analyst throughout all of Arch Manning's tenure? Almost certainly not. So I don't know how. I think David Cutcliffe joining the staff helps the team almost as much as it would help an Arch Manning recruitment, because I think he would bring a lot to a staff. He's a really good coach, but I've been told to not overreact to what that might mean for Arch Manning. It certainly won't hurt, but I don't know that the Mannings look at that and think to themselves, oh, well, then he'll just be the quarterback's coach or inside the program and doing what they ultimately, if David Cutcliffe was going to be involved in Arch Manning's college career, I don't know that they're smart. They're not going to be fools about this. Here's one I wanted to. Jason, this one just had your name written all over it. Terry asks, here's a major if. If Texas somehow beats Alabama, do you think it may hurt Texas more than help with possible overconfidence and overlooking the rest of the schedule?
Well, I'll just say this, Terry. If you're a Texas fan watching it, you sure as hell want to find out, right? No, I don't think that'd be the least of my concerns.
That's my favorite question of the spring.
If your team makes the Super Bowl, if the Steelers make the Super Bowl, might they not be focused on the Super Bowl? I'll take my chances on that. Okay.
No, that'd be a great problem to have, is them overlooking the next couple of games after Alabama. I've been holding that one for you, just because as the major, you are typically our reason of voice of reason at times on this show, and anybody asking a big if question related to beating Alabama and overconfidence kicking in, I wanted it to be you. All of us. This one I saw earlier, and was Isaiah asks, if the Texas D gets O'Shawn Mathis, is this defense ready for next year, or are there still missing pieces? Alex, I have definitive thoughts, but I want to hear yours.
They'd be a lot more ready. Look, man, I think just go through it at the different levels of the defense, right? The defensive line, if Keandre Coburn could play up to his potential, if Tavondre Sweat could continue to be good, if they can get Byron Murphy if he can continue to grow and he'll be a household name. If he takes this, if he overproduces from freshman to sophomore year the same way that he kind of overproduced from prospect to freshman year, like after his sophomore year, he'll be a household name in the Big 12. And then you have Alfred Collins coming along, you have Vernon Broughton coming along. You have some pieces there. I've seen some people talk about Baron Sorrell in the chat. And let me just answer about him real quickly. People say people forget about him. I've not forgotten about him, because he did flash for one game, but then over the ensuing two games, when he started getting more playing time, there was a real lack of core strength that sort of showed up with him. So, but that's what off seasons are for in college football. He could come back, and there could be something there with him. Of course, Justice Finkley, like all these guys. I think that defensive front sounds fine. At the linebackers, it gets a little bit more shaky. It becomes, how confident are you in Jalen Ford? How confident are you in David Benda? How much, is Luke Brockermeyer? He's going to miss spring. How much does he end up mixing in? I guess you can have some question marks there. With the DBs, I think these corners are going to be better, right? I think these corners are going to – you got Deshaun Jameson coming back. I think the choice of like Ryan Watts or Jahdae Barron at the other one. Jahdae Barron was the most productive per-snap cornerback Texas had last year, allowed the worst opposing quarterback completion percentage when targeted last season of any corner on the Texas roster. You have Anthony Cook moving back to safety that could be a real boon for him and his NFL draft stock. You have JD Coffey that could potentially emerge. There's all kinds of playmakers back there that I think that could coalesce into something good. It's just I think for me, it's just like is Coach Kwiatkowski's scheme going to be better? I think the pieces are probably in place, right? Like I don't know what was the exact question. Is the defense set to improve? What was the exact question?
I think would the defense be ready? I think is the way that it was asked. Or
no personnel excuses allowed, as far as I'm concerned. No personnel excuses allowed. I feel like maybe you could call for that in the first year, and I've always been the guy to say give Coach K a little bit of grace, just based on what he's been able to do and the coaching pedigree that he brought to Texas. But personnel in my view, cannot be an excuse given the talent that you see at every level of the defense that just happened to kind of underperform.
I still think they need an inside linebacker upgrade, and I think the fact that the coaches have gone after so many linebackers already, and quite frankly, tried to make that upgrade last offseason with the USC transfer. Had that happened, that hole in the defense might not exist at all.
The Kennedy Brooks run, the run from who was the Jalen Warren run, the two runs that broke Texas's back, man. That was Luke Brockermeyer. He could not get off blocks at the second level moving laterally. Like if you get a guy that's a little bit better and a little bit more athletic, those plays don't happen. And maybe those wins don't occur. And all of a sudden, you're looking at the season a lot differently. So, I guess I agree with you, Ketch. They could stand to upgrade.
And I think they're going to. But if they don't, I'm with you on the no excuses, like no personnel excuses, but I'll think that they do have still a hole. They just have to figure it out. That's where good coaching has to come into play. Last question, and then we'll go into parting shots because we could do this all day long. Apologies to everybody whose questions didn't get answered, especially since the last question I'm going to ask is the last question that was literally asked in the chat so far, at least that I've seen. We hadn't seen him until just now, but Money Out the A wants to know, could we see Texas have a linebacker class for next year like they had for the O-line class this year? Mr. Suchomel, balls on the tee, go.
Yeah, I don't see it. That'd be ideal for Texas, but I don't see it. First off, there is not it's not a linebacker class that has anywhere near the talent or depth that we saw from offensive line last year. They'd have to recruit nationally, which they're probably going to do anyways. Anthony Hill, they've got to find a way to get Anthony Hill, obviously. I mean, we're talking about inside linebacker. I'm not sure Anthony Hill couldn't come in and start this year if he wanted to graduate a year early like Quinn Ewers did. So they got Anthony Hill. I mean, if I look, it's especially in state, there's just not a ton of guys. Carson Dean's kind of an edge player that they're in a good position with. They really like Darian Gillette out of Marlin, a teammate of Jeray Bledsoe's. I mean, they're in the mix there, but then you're talking after that, you're getting down to kind of 3-star-ish type talent. So solid players, but they're going to try to take numbers at linebacker. I just don't know where they're going to get them from. They're going to have to probably pull a couple out-of-state players. Right now, I don't know who those would be. I mean, it all starts, though, with Anthony Hill. If they don't get Anthony Hill, that's going to be tough. I mean, A&M's coming on strong there. I think he's down to 6, and, of course, Texas is in that mix. So Anthony Hill might be about as important as a player in this class as anybody on the Texas board. But to answer the question, no, I don't think we'll see a linebacker class anywhere comparable to what we saw from the offensive line class in that 2022 cycle.
And part of that, Jason, is that offensive line, that's the best offensive line class in history that I've ever seen at the school, going back 30 years, 30 plus years. So, that's aiming really high. Yeah. I mean, that was a year ago. It's kind of an anomaly in a really good way, a historically positive anomaly. Boy, if you could get half of that, that'd actually be a really great linebacker class. If, instead of multiple 5-stars, you got one, and then
you
instead
of 4-man linebacker class for Texas, and one of them is Anthony Hill.
Yeah.
You're probably pretty happy with that, right?
Yeah, man.
You can take a Carson Dean and throw in a couple others and Anthony Hill, and you're like, you know what? I'll take that and be happy. You should.
Totally on the same page with you there. Let's go into parting shots. Anybody want to go first? I have mine. If anybody needs me to lead off while you guys think of a parting shot, I can go first.
No, I'll go first. And this was not on my radar until 15 minutes ago when someone said that they like when Alex and I get into a back and forth banter. Have I officially won the Casey Thompson bet? What if he goes to Nebraska and it just kills it at Nebraska?
No, you won the bet.
Because if I remember correctly, it said he had to.
Hold on. It's Ketchum's vote that you won the bet.
Well, if you listen to the audio, you said by his junior year he had to be a good college quarterback, and we said, what does that mean? All conference. So when do we?
He had to at least be starting at Texas.
And he did. He did start
until he got benched
by his junior. But he started.
But then he lost his job, and he had to be a good starting quarterback.
Yeah, but was he good was he good versus Utah or whatever team that was in the bowl game? Was he?
I mean, if you're having to go
was he good
as to frame it around a single game, then you're probably
what about other single games earlier in the
Texas
season?
Tech,
before he got hurt? I mean,
ultimately, Alex, do you trust my judgment to be honest or not?
I do, but the bet was not fucking Ketchum's choice.
This is one I would think
if the bet was a vote of Ketchum, a vote of Anwar.
Right. I'm just giving my vote. I'm the only one here. I mean, ultimately I'm giving you my vote, and then we have to ask Dustin and Anwar for their vote, but neither one of them are on this.
So, Alex,
Oh,
just
yeah,
so I'm
yeah,
clear,
yeah. Okay.
your vote would be that he was a good college quarterback at Texas.
I'm
Starting.
He can't even say that with a straight face without
my
hesitating.
vote. My vote does not matter here. The votes that matter are Geoff Ketchum, Dustin.
He just pulled a Clinton on
Anwar
us.
Richardson.
This is one. Now, I couldn't be more wrong on the board with our draft, but I would guess if we put this one to the Orangebloods message board, I would win in a landslide. But I don't know if I want to trust the board.
You are not a pro-democracy after the last round of voting.
Money out to Anus says, I'll settle this. What was the official bet? Money, go back, it was Casey's like first or second practice, and we got to watch them throw the ball against air, not even one-on-ones, not 7-on-7, nothing. And Alex said on our Modcast, Casey Thompson's going to be a good college quarterback. And I said, whoa. I said, slow down. I said, I'm not even saying he won't, but my point was you can't make that declaration after one practice. And we got into it, and then it turned into a bet about lunch if Casey Thompson would be a good college quarterback by his junior year, I think was a stipulation. And then it was what constitutes good college quarterback. I said all conference.
He was good enough to win the starting job. He was good enough on this same damn Modcast.
Bad enough to get benched
for Ketchum himself to talk about how Texas might have the best running back, the best receiver, and the best quarterback in all of the Big 12 before he got hurt. I mean,
that's an excuse, but yeah.
Okay, but
bottom line is he got benched.
I don't think it's as clear cut an answer.
He didn't win the starting job.
Well, no, and you're right about that, Alex. Because look, Thompson led the Big 12
job. He got handed the starting job after Hudson Card faltered. He didn't win the starting job, Alex. He got handed the starting job.
Well, yeah, so he got handed the starting job, meaning that he won it.
No, he didn't win it.
No, look, if you go there, Hudson Card lost the starting quarterback job. Casey Thompson didn't win it, as evidenced by the fact that when Casey started to struggle post-injury.
Should we think about somebody just as a good, just good? I'm not saying great, not saying the best. Shouldn't we consider them good if there was a point in the season, last season, when we were having the discussion, is he the best quarterback in the Big 12?
Alex, one time in middle school, I went 13 for 13 in a basketball game. Did that make me a great player? No, I just had
we're not talking about great, but you were good that day.
Yeah, but I think the retort to your question, Alex, would be, was Gerard Hurd a good college quarterback because
he lit up
Cal?
Well, but that was one game.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
he had a couple. I'll give you that against shitty competition.
It's one game.
Yeah, and Casey had a few.
Yeah. And at one point,
not enough to keep his job, and not
before he was hurt,
his head coach to replace him as soon as possible.
Right. And at one point before he was hurt, a guy that we were discussing as possibly being the best quarterback in the Big 12.
Well, look, you have my vote. Well, who you really need to work on now
is
Dustin and Anwar. Because if one of them side it with Jason along with me, you're on the hook, man. Although, to be fair, I still owe you my steak dinner funds. So it may be that I just paid that up.
Oh, I wish I wish Almar was here right now to hear that.
So. I may have to, forgive me for not sending my steak dinner fund yet. But it may be that I'm just on the hook. Like I owe him like $250 or something.
Well, you don't owe me. You were just being generous and saying
but I made a public declaration of my generosity, and I can't back out on that.
Fair enough.
You've got credit that will either work now or like for fantasy.
I love that idea. Okay, all right, cool.
But somehow I owe you $250-ish bucks. Okay, Alex. Jason has had his part in his shot. He wanted to stir the controversy at the very end.
Yeah, dude. I just put a column up on Orangebloods. I actually liked it. Just about this being the final year of the combine in Indianapolis and how I'm going to kind of miss it, but I don't know why, because Indianapolis is cold and it's not that fun a city. And if I'm going to spend a week a year every year, I mean, I've been there every year I've been there for every combine since 2012. And if I'm going to be away from my family for, a week a year and a week during the Senior Bowl, like, do I really want to spend, a week a year every year in Mobile, Alabama, and a week a year every year in Indianapolis, Indiana, right? So I get to thinking about it, and I'm still like, I'm going to miss it. I'm going to miss not knowing where to find my friends, or where all the scouts and the agents are and stuff like that. It'll be new every year, but I kind of think it'll be a cool change to go see new spots every year and stuff like that. But with that said, man, I'm going to take full advantage this year. I'm going to make sure to get my cocktail shrimp, go to all my favorite spots, see all my favorite bartenders and everything like that. And do you know what else the other thing was? And you can go read the column. This is going to be a lean year for Texas at the Combine. Probably the leanest year there have been 2 other years that I've been at the Combine where Texas has had fewer than 2 players. They had the 1 year with just Deontay Foreman, the 1 year with just Hassan Ridgeway. But both of those guys were higher level prospects and came in with a lot more steam than a mix of Josh Thompson and Cameron Dicker. This really does feel like kind of the low water mark of the Longhorns I've seen at the Combine. But as I lay out in the column, as I'm moving on from Indianapolis and I'm letting go of it and I'm okay with it, I'm becoming okay with it. Texas is moving on too. Texas could have the RB1 in the 2023 draft and the wide receiver one in the 2024 draft. And that's almost like what the odds on favorite kind of should be. And that's going to be a big, big change for Texas as far as the way that it's perceived with the NFL talent. Because if you just look and you see what Texas has done since I've been covering these combines, it's been good players, but it hasn't been, real NFL difference makers. You talk about 1 year, you get the RB1 in 2023 with Bijan Robinson, he should be the odds-on favorite at this point to be the first running back taken. Xavier Worthy, without a doubt, should be the odds-on favorite based on a bunch of stuff that I laid out in that column to be the first wide receiver taken, and from information that I've gotten from scouts over the course of the last week, just kind of talking about it. So if Texas were to have the RB1 in the 2023 NFL draft, the wide receiver one in the 2024 NFL draft, man, that puts Texas on a platform to where you get those faces of the program out there, you get them in the football ethos, you're operating at a different level. And so with this kind of weird and, tough as this NFL Combine is going to be for the Longhorns, not having that many in attendance, I think that there's a whole lot to look forward to, even though I'm going to miss Indy. I'm going to miss Indy a lot, but it'll be a new era to turn over, and I think it's going to be a new era for Texas football moving into 2023, 2024, and beyond.
We need to pour out
Alex, where does it go after Indy? I haven't read your thing yet.
I think they're going to have different cities bid on it. They're saying that Frisco is probably going to be the most likely to get it the first year, but I think that Mark Davis left something to say about that. I think he'll probably want to have it in Las Vegas there at Allegiant. So they'll bid for it, but yeah, they're going to move it every year. I'm sure it'll be in Indy maybe again one day, but it won't be every year. And I can't believe I'm going to miss it. It's so cold. There's not much to do.
You love the shrimp cocktail.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Pour out a little liquor for Alex's shrimp cocktail fixation, because that's what he loves more about that trip to Indianapolis than anything else.
I'm gonna eat that like every night, dude. I'm just gonna I'm gonna get sick of it.
Oh, all right. I have a parting shot real quick. I was gonna talk about how I'm getting old, and one of my favorite things in life is just a clean house. But no, I'm gonna actually go in another direction and just add a boy to Xavier Worthy, who used to be an Orangebloods athlete, but is no longer an Orangebloods athlete because he just didn't want to do it anymore. But when we first started doing videos with Xavier in the summer, I just, I didn't have any set expectations for how involved Xavier Worthy would be as a team leader, as a spokesperson, as a needle mover in the program. He could have just as easily have shown up and played his butt off on the field and then just kind of quietly went about his way and nobody would have said anything. I'm amazed that Xavier Worthy is such an alpha that if there's a recruit that Texas is after, if there's a transfer in the quarterback, like he's everywhere. And I feel like in a very short amount of time, we've watched him get really comfortable inside his skin as an out-of-state player playing at Texas as a young player. And then before his freshman year of academically is over with, he is kind of an undisputed leader on the team. That's a bit of a surprise for me. I don't know that I would have guessed after just doing some Xavier Worthy interviews that he would progress so quickly and feel so comfortable in that role that it's kind of nonstop. I feel like this is a program that's needed guys like Xavier Worthy to not wait to have the torch handed to them. For far too long, young players in this program have like conceded territorial space of control because they felt obligated to let older players who aren't good kind of have their turn. And quite frankly, if this program is ever truly going to make the turn that it wants to make, it's going to be because enough Xavier Worthys out there exist that they're not going to wait to be told when it's okay, when they can just be assertive. They're just going to be assertive, and either body can get with it or get left behind. Attaboy, Xavier Worthy, you are doing something right now that I would say far too few guys have done in recent years in this program. And I hope more guys are watching kind of you assert yourself, because frankly, I could do without the senior class being the undisputed like voice of the team when for year after year after year for more than a decade plus, they didn't really do anything as juniors to warrant that. Take control of this program and do with it what your unreal talent thinks it needs to do. Anybody else got anything other than that? We're good. For myself, the waving Jason troublemaking Suchomel, I think we're going to get some finality to this bet, though. Like, it's time.
It's only been, what, 3 years or so?
Yes. So stay tuned to the next episode. I might see if McComas can hop on.
Yeah, I was going to say we need to bring McComas in for a guest appearance.
McComas, we'll see if we can get McComas in for a guest appearance.
Well, let's not do it next week because I'm going to be in Indy. So let's do it the week after because I need to be here to defend Casey Thompson's honor. Okay.
So I got 2 weeks to plan for this.
Okay.
But for myself, Jason, Alex, the departed, not like from this earth, but just from this video, Anwar Richardson, and the long departed Dustin McComas, who will try to get back to just being parted in 2 weeks from now. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the interaction. Thanks for the commentary, all of it. We'll talk to you next week. Later.